Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today by my good friend Adam Pfeifer. He's been on the show many times before. I'm sure that you're already following him. You're already reading the work that he's produced. It's fantastic. But Adam, thank you for being here, and just tell everybody here at the top where they can find you.
Yeah, always enjoy these visits. Appreciate the time. Go to ftnfantasy.com, doing a bunch of stuff. Obviously, we have right now it's heavy March Madness time, obviously, so we have a ton of amazing content there, which I'm not a part of because we have people at that site that are way more knowledgeable with college hoops. But yeah, I mean, if you obviously it already started, but hopefully you were checking that out. And then of course we'll be ramping up the football content with the draft coming up. I feel like this is quietly like the worst time for football and Dynasty because free agency is mostly done. We still have a couple players. We'll see where they land. And then it's like, okay, cool. The draft is around the corner, but that month is kind of annoying because it's like both around the corner and still ways out at the same time, and not much is going to happen. But I'm excited for the draft. I'm ready. We'll talk about a couple rookies today, but I'm just ready to see, especially in a Dynasty league where I pretty much own the entire first round. I'm excited to see where everybody goes.
I will say it is a little bit of a period in limbo because we've had some values change because of the free agent market. And we think some values are going to change because of the NFL draft. We don't know whose. And so we're going to talk today about some of our favorite Dynasty buys and sells. I'm actually using the values over at Keep Trade Cut because those are a pretty good approximation of the consensus. And so I always tell people my trade chart is based on my views. And these are how I view these guys. Keep Trade Cut kind of tells you how the community views guys. And so we will talk about at those prices some guys that we are buying and selling. But I want to get started with a few of, Adam said it, the draft is coming up. I want to hear some of your rookie thoughts. So our three questions will be three rookie questions. Rank your top three running backs in this class, not named Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, so I think the consensus is obviously Amari and Hampton at the second spot. A lot of people that I really respect believe he should be like in that same tier as Jeanty, just like a spot below him. He obviously crushed the combine. He's got the size. He has everything you want. Like he's got the potential to have 20 carries per game. He's got the speed, the athleticism. So he should easily be second. And then it gets interesting. For me, I am pretty high on Quinshon Judkins.
Okay.
And I think if you are looking at more of a production profile type of standpoint, you can't just solely look at last year when he was splitting with Travion Henderson, because back at Ole Miss, like once upon a time, Zach Evans was like a 5-star prospect.
Right.
And he made him almost irrelevant. And it's funny because not that I'm a huge film guy, I like to watch film, but I remember watching Zach Evans' film when he was coming out, and it's like when you watch the running back and you actually end up liking the offensive lineman more. Right. I was like, okay, who's Zach Evans? This is cool. Who's Quinshon Judkins? That's who I need to know about. So he was great. I think between him and Travion, like Travion projects as more of maybe the upside touches because he can rip off 30-plus yard runs and do more in the passing game. But Judkins, with his size, he had a really good combine. He's probably somebody that projects more to get 18 to 20 carries per game and goal line work, whereas I don't see that happening for Travion Henderson. So I would have Quinshon 3, or I guess second behind Hampton in this situation, and then I would have Travion. I still like Caleb Johnson. I didn't love the 40 time. I didn't think he was going to run like a 4.4, but I think 40 times also can get overrated. I think from watching him, he looks and plays faster. So, but just based off upside, and I think it sounds like the draft capital will be not a lot different, but pretty different between Henderson and Caleb Johnson. I'll put Henderson third.
So I have Henderson, then Judkins, and then shrug emoji.
Right. It could be like Sampson if you like don't say. It could be
right. I like Devin Neal quite a bit. But I will say, I think, and we've had this debate over on the main show a few times here recently, and I know Adam said he was on Henderson Island with Dave and Jamie, and I'm a Henderson guy. I think the way I'd probably put it is I think Judkins is a better rusher, but we live in a PPR world.
Right.
And I think Henderson might have like 60, 80 catch seasons. And so I'll lean towards him because of the scoring system. Do any wide receivers in this class ever crack the top 12 in Dynasty?
It's going to be tough as much as I do like Tet. I think the best case for Tet could be like they would have to trade down probably, but like if you pair him with Drake May, because I'm really high on Drake May. But we've seen like he's gotten comps like Drake London, who's definitely been and probably still is a top 12 Dynasty wide receiver. For me, there's other players too. Like Luther Burden is so polarizing because on the high end, I've seen comps like DJ Moore and Deebo Samuel, and those guys have been flirting with that top 12 at times in Dynasty, especially DJ Moore. But then there's like it really comes down with Luther Burden how you value production profile or film, because production profile last year wasn't great, but the year before was like age 19, elite breakout season. It's everything you want. But then you look at how he gets there, and it's a lot of scheme stuff. It's a lot of slot usage. It's mostly only slot usage. And now, on one hand, that could be really bad because a lot of those players that are strictly in that mold, you look at the low end comps he could potentially have of Malachi Corley, Curtis Samuel, some of these guys, Kadarius Toney maybe. But then that's also a way to get really high floor and high. Just give him 2 screen targets per game and give him like 8 slot targets. Let him do stuff after the catch. So I think if he hits and his film is better than a lot of people suggest, and he does go first round to a good team, Burden, if he really hits, I could see, but I think it'll be pretty hard. Not because these players aren't talented, just the draft classes we've seen before these guys. I mean,
right.
Last year, the years before, it's just those guys feel pretty cemented, especially last year when you have, Ladd, Brian Thomas, all these guys. So.
And I think like the other name obviously is Travis Hunter. If he's a full-time wide receiver, then maybe
that could be the spot, because if he goes to the Patriots, maybe they view him as a wide receiver because they already have Gonzalez, they brought in why am I blanking on who they brought in at corner? But if they view him as strictly as a wide receiver, now we're talking.
Right. Question number 3 is
Tyler Carlton Davis, by the way.
Is Tyler Warren going to be the tight end 3 in Dynasty soon?
I mean, he's going to get top 20 draft capital probably. You can make the case as soon as he's drafted, just because 1 and 2 are pretty locked with Bowers and McBride. Like if you ranked him 3rd at tight end, right? Say he goes to Denver. Say he goes to the Chargers, right? You could talk me into 3rd right now.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't think Warren is anywhere close to Bowers as a prospect, but it's just like that 3rd spot is really up for grabs.
Right.
Like it's probably Laporta right now.
For sure.
And then you have Hawkinson, but Kincaid, bust, potentially. Pitts, we know it's not happening. Like there's really, and then you have obviously the veterans like Andrews, like Kelce, like those guys are way down there because of their age. So honestly, I think it's yes. And I guess the question more is like, how soon?
Right. Yeah. This year it could happen, but Laporta could also take it back this year.
Like if you told me that he goes whatever 20th or 21st, whatever Denver's at, and he's there. Well, I guess he might not now with Evan Engram there, but maybe he goes to the Chargers, right? Like, do you like him more than Laporta?
I will probably need to, like, I'm always a little bit slower on the tight end, so I'll probably need to see him do it.
For sure.
He'll probably be 4th for me, probably be ahead of Hawkinson, but and there's just usually, not with Bowers, obviously, not with Laporta, there's usually so much patience needed with these tight ends.
Yeah, this is weird.
And
we had a stretch where rookie tight ends were doing nothing, and back-to-back seasons are doing everything.
That's exactly right. Let's take a short break, and then let's get into our favorite Dynasty buys and sells.
Guys, can you feel it? Legends were born here. History was made here. These are hallowed grounds.
Hallowed grounds? The NCIS squad room?
Well, I wasn't talking about that, but I was talking about Augusta National.
All right. It's finally time for the Masters. I hear it's a tradition unlike any other.
Did have one comment right at the start of the show. Thank you, Will. It says CMC has to be a sell this year, right? Don't you think? His bilateral Achilles tendonitis is going to act up and cause him to miss games. And that kind of is I think a good jumping off point for like sells and buys are based for me largely upon value. What does everyone else think of them? I did go look at McCaffrey just to see He's currently RB17 over at Keep Trade Cut, and it's a good time to mention that they already have their rookies in the chart. So Judkins is ahead of him, Henderson is ahead of him, Hampton is ahead of him, Jeanty is ahead of him. So that'd make him RB13 amongst players who are currently in the NFL. I've got him at RB16. So yeah, I think if you can get that value, I'm not sure RB13 is quite taking into account the full risk of McCaffrey. At the same time, Saquon Barkley's my RB5. I wouldn't be all that surprised if McCaffrey's better than Saquon Barkley this year. Like I
wouldn't be surprised if McCaffrey was the best player in fantasy this year.
Exactly. His range of outcomes, and I've made this comparison before, and it's a good way to jump into my buys. It reminds me a lot of Justin Fields and Anthony Richardson right now, except even more extreme. Because McCaffrey might play a couple games and the injuries are too much and we just never see good Christian McCaffrey again. Or he might be the best player in fantasy.
Yeah.
Fields and Richardson, my two buys at the quarterback position. And I know a lot of people immediately are going to say, they might be not worth nothing. Well, they're not worth much right now. They are currently QB 26 and QB 27 over on Keep Trade Cut. At that cost, you don't find quarterbacks in that range of value that have the potential to give you a top 5 season. And I think both of these guys have the chance this year to give you a top 5 season. Yes, they also might lose their jobs, but these are if you can find this much upside for this cheap of a cost, I think you have to take that swing. And I'll be trying to take that swing this offseason, Adam. I got a couple of questions last week on the mailbag. Maybe it was earlier this week on the mailbag about, should I just accept this second round pick and in Superflex for Anthony Richardson? I'm so scared of what's about to happen. I'm happy to give up a round 2 pick for Richardson or Fields right now in Superflex.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me Justin Fields plays the majority of the season, like I think his floor is quarterback 15. Like I just don't see him being worse than that. And then Richardson, like, yeah, everybody's talking about Daniel Jones, but and we're just talking about like the downside of, okay, what if Richardson loses his job? Like, what if he doesn't? His floor is probably pretty high too. He had a handful of really good fantasy weeks to end the season last year, and those were in games where Jonathan Taylor was literally getting 30 carries. So I like that, especially obviously Superflex. Like, it's hard to get quarterbacks, but quarterback 27, you said, for Fields is kind of crazy to me. I think that should be updated quite a bit based off the fact that he has a starting job right now, and I would like to see the Jets get a better second receiver, but we know he can run for 700 to 1,000 yards. And I just think, like, I finally started redraft rankings yesterday, and Fields, I think, was like QB 12 for me. So I just don't see him being worse than like QB 15 if he starts the majority of the season.
Another guy whose value certainly is volatile for the next month and a half, DeAndre Swift, with what the Bears may or may not do at the running back position. But over on Keep Trade Cut, he's currently RB35 in the Dynasty rankings. And I think people look at what happened with Ben Johnson and they say, I said it, Jamal Williams scored all those touchdowns. Ben Johnson obviously hates DeAndre Swift. But even in that tandem, he was more valuable than this ranking. And Swift is a guy who's 26 years old. If things click this second time with Ben Johnson, we might get a couple of top 12 seasons out of DeAndre Swift. I've got him valued as RB18. Now, that's without the rookies. I'd probably have 3 or 4 rookies ahead of him. So if you want to say RB22, still 12 spots ahead of where he is valued by the consensus. Are you buying DeAndre Swift at an RB35, 36 cost? And I'll just tell you the other guys that are in that range I'll pull that up in a second. I thought I had his name right here on the list. What do you think of Swift and kind of the volatility with the new coach, the potential of the Bears drafting a running back? What does his future look like?
So with the moves the Bears made in the offseason, with the offensive line, Drew Dahlman, Joe Thuney, everybody they brought in, I feel like now it's this set in stone lock that Jeanty's going there. But like, he has to be there first. Like, the Raiders could take him.
Right.
And unless they get Jeanty or Hampton, Like, that's the only way I could see Swift just becoming like a 30% snap, like 6 touch per game type of player in this offense. And then you have the fact that everybody's so focused on how Ben Johnson kind of, wasn't a fan of Swift's and they moved on from him. But DeAndre Swift, you look at that stretch early last season, granted they were all in good matchups, but he was a top 12 running back in most of those weeks. It was really good. And we talk about the offensive line upgrade being good for Caleb Williams and whoever the running back they draft is. And I do think they draft a running back, but that could still apply to DeAndre Swift. I don't see a scenario where, again, unless they draft Jeanty and it's midway through the season, that Swift is just relegated to a backup role entirely. So RB35 is, especially for a team that's like loaded at wide receiver, good at tight end, good quarterbacks, a little thin at running back, you don't need DeAndre Swift to become a top 10 player at that price tag. And he can kind of be one of those underrated kind of roster players on your roster to really fill it out. So I like that. And I think really, unless it's Hampton or Jeanty, I'm not freaking out about Swift, especially at that price.
Just a reminder, that 2022 season, he had only 99 rush attempts in 14 games. He was RB 17 on a per game basis that year. So yeah, yes, he's probably going to share with someone else. I don't think he's going to get 20 touches per game, but you don't need it if Ben Johnson's offense works as it has worked. The offensive line should definitely be better. He's been wildly efficient in the past. He's been used as a pass catching back in the past. We expect this offense will have plenty of targets for the running backs. Go buy DeAndre Swift at that cost. I found the list. Here are the 5 running backs directly ahead of Swift currently: Tyjae Spears, Ramondre Stevenson, Jonathan Brooks, Tank Bigsby, and Jordan Mason.
Yeah, I mean, the only player that, I mean, obviously Mason if he becomes the starter at any point, but like,
right,
you're with Tyjae Spears, if Swift loses work, he's probably getting the same work Spears gets. Right? So,
right.
And he's probably, and no, I don't want to say probably. I mean, we still have to project for the Bears, but they'll be a better offense in Tennessee. So, the only one that really makes it somewhat compelling is Mason, but that would probably be more of a next year or 2 years from now thing, because I think this is probably the last year Aaron Jones is there.
Yeah, I would think that's the case. At the wide receiver position, I've been on an island here at CBS on this guy, so hopefully you will have some optimism as well. Although I'm not sure how much optimism you have to buy Deebo. Deebo Samuel currently wide receiver 50 over on the Keep Trade Cut values. I like this fit a lot in the Cliff Kingsbury offense with Terry McLaurin working the deep part of the field, Deebo taking the underneath stuff. Maybe a few of those targets that went to Zach Ertz last year can go to Deebo, even though Ertz is still going to be there. And we've seen him have a really disappointing efficiency season in the past and then bounce back the next year. I'm not sure he was ever fully healthy last year. I think Washington probably throws more this year than San Francisco did last year. Not worried about the target volume opportunity now that he's gotten away from Aiyuk, Kittle, McCaffrey, Jawan Jennings. I think this could be a nice bounce back year for Deebo Samuel. And again, wide receiver 50, he's cheap enough to where you're not risking much.
So as I tend to do when I come on the show, Heath, I like to plug the FTN Fantasy Stats Hub because it's just so fun to look through all this stuff. So when he got traded to Washington, I wanted to look at some of the stats because everybody knows Deebo had a down 2023 season,
right?
2024 season, sorry. But he, like you mentioned, is a pretty good fit for this offense. I remember back in the preseason, we were waiting, where's the Jaden Daniels deep balls to Terry McLaurin? It was all the screen stuff, and it felt like it was, okay, they're probably just trying to hide stuff from other teams. They don't want to show everything on tape. But Jaden Daniels and McLaurin still had one of the best deep ball connections in the league, but this was still a very, very screen-heavy offense. Jaden Daniels last season, 4.1 screen attempts per game, 6th most among quarterbacks. Deebo, again, down 2024 season. I'm sure the instance where he had pneumonia didn't help. Right. But in 2023, just based off screen passes alone, according to the Stats Hub, 30.8% explosive play rate, which was 6th best in the league. 16 yards after the catch per reception was easily first. And he was 5th in EPA per target off screens. Again, you wonder, is he the same explosive player? That's fair. But they were giving a lot of these screen targets to Olamide Zaccheaus, Zach Ertz. Like, I'm pretty excited about Deebo just based off the fit in the offense and the fact that we saw Jaden Daniels already play how he did. We know this will be a borderline elite offense. So Deebo, yes, you obviously don't trade for him if you are rebuilding, but again, contending team could use a little bit more firepower on offense at wide receiver, somebody that could probably give you a decent floor, and there's still some upside weeks. Plus, I fully expect a couple carries per game from Deebo as well. So
yep. Nice. We've got one more, and it is Travis Kelce. I almost feel like his value is still factoring in some risk of him retiring because he's currently tight end 21 over at Keep Trade Cut. A list of guys who are currently ahead of him: Brenton Strange, Cole Kmet, Jake Ferguson, Pat Freiermuth, Cade Otton. He's not the same guy that he was. I'm not trying to make that argument at all. And there is plenty of target competition in Kansas City. He might just be a one-year buy, but I think it's worth remembering that in a terrible year last year where he only scored 3 touchdowns, he averaged 12.3 fantasy points per game. He was better than Mark Andrews. He was better than Sam Laporta. He was better, I think, than all of the guys whose names I just mentioned. As a contender, if I can buy Travis Kelce at a tight end 21 cost and maybe solve my tight end position for the year that I'm chasing a championship, I'm 100% in.
Especially at tight end too, right? Like if you're contending, age really doesn't matter because outside of the top 3-4 players at the position, I mean, we're hoping some of these guys get to 10 PPR points per game probably. And Kelce showed in a down year, like you mentioned, he was over 12 with, I'm not saying Kelce's going to come out and have 12 touchdowns, but like laughably low touchdown production for a player of Kelce's caliber. So, yeah, it's obviously very case specific. You have to be not only contending, but I would say you probably have to be one of the 3 best teams in the league to even trade Kelce or trade for Kelce. But yeah, I mean, especially at tight end with how just middling most of the position is, Kelce at his elevated age can still be top 5 PPR points per game.
So that's my dynasty buys: Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, DeAndre Swift, Deebo Samuel, Travis Kelce. Remember those costs that we talk about because that's what make them buys. I don't want you to go out there and overpay for these guys, but they're cheap right now. Go get them cheap. You had a buy or 2 of your own, right, Adam?
Yeah, I think I talked about this player last time I was on this podcast with you actually, but it's Rome Odunze. Like I'm so high on him. I don't really but I don't really look into how he did last season because it was really bad circumstance. You look at, according to the Stats Hub, 27% of his targets were either go or post routes. And then Caleb Williams was like one of the worst deep ball passers in the league. He was under 28% of his deep balls he completed. So you bring in Ben Johnson, who will probably use Rome Odunze, not exclusively in the Amon-Ra St. Brown role, but you look at last season on targets with a player in pre-snap motion. Amon-Ra St. Brown had almost 20. DJ Moore had 16. Jameson Williams had 11. And then you go all the way down to Rome Odunze, who had 6 all year. That's going to change. He's still going to get some vertical routes, which will be good. And Caleb Williams will probably have more time and feel more comfortable passing down the field because of the offensive line upgrades. And then you have the fact that I think it was 40-something% of Rome Odunze's air yards were deemed uncatchable. That was one of the highest rates in the NFL. Just everything should be better for Rome Odunze. Caleb is still going to – we all love Caleb to break out. We all love Ben Johnson. We should be getting pieces of this entire offense. And then you also have the fact that Keenan Allen, 8.1 targets per game, no longer with the team. I'm all in on Rome. I looked at the values and the rankings for him on Keep Trade Cut. He is still relatively high, but I am so high in the player, the offense, the change in scheme for him that I'm willing to pay up for Rome Odunze. I just think I think we forget too quickly because of what Ladd and Brian Thomas did, guys that were drafted after him. But I still think Rome is an awesome player. No,
I agree 100%. I looked at the values. He's basically tied in value with Tet McMillan. And
that's not close for me.
Look at the rookie rankings. Tet McMillan currently the 103 in the rookie rankings, projected draft order of rookie drafts, if you will. Are you giving up your 2025 103 for Rome Odunze?
Superflex or non-superflex?
This is superflex, but Cam Ward's actually 104.
Right. That's the thing. It's different quarterback class too. I'm just naturally higher on Rome too, so I
Right.
think I would.
I think that the other side of that question is like maybe you're trading a rookie pick, but that math kind of doesn't work as well. You can look at it also in terms of the veterans. And there is a veteran that I've kind of talked a little bit about maybe selling if you're moving towards a rebuild. Would you deal AJ Brown for Rome Odunze?
Whew. That probably feels, depending on your teams and both rosters, it feels pretty even.
Right. I'd be
I'd be
Brown
fine making that trade
higher.
whichever way you were going about it.
Right. Like you're okay if you're a contender dealing
Yes.
Rome for Brown, and you're okay if you're rebuilding, trading Brown.
I would probably slightly lean Rome just in a vacuum, but I think it'd be a lot tougher if this was a different Philadelphia team, which we'll talk about in a little bit with a second player from the Eagles. But I would lean Rome, but I'm fine with it if you're trying to contend and you have to give up Rome. I would try my absolute hardest not to, but I think it's pretty close.
You also had Khalil Shakir as a buy. He's currently wide receiver 41 over at Keep Trade Cut, 2 spots ahead of Keon Coleman, his teammate. You strongly prefer Shakir to Coleman?
Yeah, it just shouldn't be that close to me. And then there's players around him like Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. Like, I'd rather have Shakir over those guys. He has the contract extension, so you're good on that front. Josh Allen's got the reworked contract, so he's in Buffalo at least till 2030. So Khalil Shakir, he's not your prototypical one wide receiver for a team, but he's this team's default one because they spread the ball around so much. This is Josh Allen's guy. This is who he trusts. He was obviously pretty good floor last season. One of the best third down receivers in the league. Can do a lot after the catch. I just think he's going to give you like a top 30 season consistently in this offense with, he's not going to ever give you a top 15 season most likely, but I'll be shocked, barring health, that he slips out of the top 30 very often these next handful, 4 or 5 years he's in Buffalo.
Jalen Wright may have a bigger opportunity with Raheem Mostert in Las Vegas. He's currently RB 43 over at Keep Trade Cut. What's your level of concern that a month and a half from now, Jalen Wright's the RB3 again?
Yeah, I mean, who knows with Mike McDaniel and everybody in Miami, but I think obviously the first part was Mostert. He was starting to really lose work anyway last year, but now he's in Las Vegas. I don't think they want to give Devon. There were some games where Achane was getting like 22, 23 touches. I think they want him in that like 14 to 18 range, which gives opportunity for Jalen Wright, especially with the pace this offense plays at. And I think there's upside for pass catching running backs in this offense. We saw it last year with Achane. Just because of the way teams have to defend this Miami offense. Tua, according to the Stats Hub, he faced too high coverage at the highest rate in the NFL, and he actually ended up checking the ball down a lot. I think that's one of the huge reasons why Jonnu Smith was as good as he was last season. So if Jalen Wright's getting like 7 to 10 touches per game, that'll be good enough to start in some weeks as a pinch. I think I would like to trade for him just if people are sleeping on him, especially that happens a lot with Dynasty. People get impatient. Right. They drafted him. He didn't do anything as a rookie, and it's like, okay, he's probably done. Circumstances obviously change and have changed for him. And I also think we're talking about buys and sells. I think if you have Jalen Wright, he is one of the best holds you can have right now. So if I have Jalen Wright, I'm not moving him. If I want some more depth at running back with some upside, definitely would like to try to trade for him.
There's a collection of second-year backs ranked in that 40 to 50 range in the consensus running back rankings. It's Braylon Allen, it's Jalen Wright, Isaac Guerendo, Blake Corum. Is Wright your favorite of that group?
It's Guerendo pretty easily now, but it's tough because Corum I liked as a player, but I believe he was also a little bit of an older prospect.
Right.
And then you have the fact that he's had the injuries, and the first year they clearly showed no interest in lightening Kyren Williams' workload. So I'd probably rank it Guerendo pretty easily, and then Jalen Wright, Blake Corum are relatively close. I'll lean Jalen Wright. I think there's better chance of standalone value for him right now.
Let's take a short break, and then we'll get to our Dynasty sells. All right, we are back, and we have a handful of dynasty sells for you here, but I want to start with a guy who I put him on my list. I asked Adam for his sells before he saw the list. He gave me the same guy. It's Tyrone Tracy, currently RB23 over at Keep Trade Cut. Now, we've talked a lot on this show over the years about how if you have a day 3 or a UDFA running back who really pops in that rookie season, you need to be really, really careful about betting too much on that carrying over. We saw that with Tracy. He had warts too. He had the fumble issues. I don't really still believe that he is a feature back in the NFL. And RB23 with the rookies factored in, so really RB18 or 19 when you're just talking about the guys who have been in the league, seems way too high for me.
Yeah, and I literally traded Tyrone Tracy on Monday. So I traded.
Great. What did you trade him for?
I traded. So this is a team where this is the same league where I have like the entire first round. So I'm going to draft like so many running backs anyway. And I'm still probably at best a year away from even making noise in this league.
Right.
That team also has Odunze, by the way. So I'm practicing what I preach. I saw a team that can contend but needs a little bit of help at running back. Also has Devin Singletary, so it doesn't hurt. I wanted to move back up into the first round. So I guess more. I traded Tyrone Tracy in a mid-second and got the 110.
Tyrone Tracy in a mid-second. So on my trade chart, that's 6.5 points of value, and the 110 is 8. So you absolutely crushed it. Great job on that deal. It's always nice. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just think like people forget Tyrone Tracy is going to be 26 in November. This will be his second NFL season. And I always go back to when you have players who are either undrafted or late running back selections and they pop as rookies. I go back to James Robinson. Like, if you didn't trade James Robinson after that, you probably set your dynasty team back. And that's not saying it's not saying Tyrone Tracy is going to be James Robinson where he has 1 year then completely falls off the face of the earth. But if you are not the Eagles, the Colts, the teams with these elite running backs or elite running back rooms, you have to be concerned this team is going to draft a running back in April. You just have to be. The class is that good. And I think Tracy, I think it was week 6 where he finally took over the job. He was okay. He was like 12.2 or 13.5 PPR points per game. His efficiency metrics weren't great, though. You look at that stretch from week 5 on, actually, he was outside the top 40 running backs in success rate. He was out to the top 30 in EPA per rush attempt. Like, he was fine, but nothing special. And if he's not anything special as a late rookie running back selection, the team is going to look elsewhere if they can. And the Giants, I believe, have 8 picks in the draft, 2 in the 3rd round.
So I think a lot of people will agree with the Tracy call. We both do. Still, the fact that he's valued at RB23 means you might have an opportunity to sell him to somebody.
Who is he around?
Just looking at those particular rankings, we've got, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Caleb Johnson, David Montgomery, Chuba Hubbard are the 5 backs in front of him.
Chuba's not even. Oh, Chuba should be ahead of him, but that's
the 5 backs behind him are Najee Harris, Zach Charbonnet, Brian Robinson, Trey Benson, and Cam Scadaboo.
Yeah, I mean, I would like Harris to be on more than a 1-year deal, but I would probably take most of those guys.
I hope that list of running backs from basically RB18 through RB28 kind of helps reflect to all of you who are listening the current state of the running back position, because there's not a lot of sure things outside of the top 8 or 9. I mentioned Brian Robinson. He was actually one of my sells, and his value has been falling, but still he is RB27. I kind of view RB27 as like my mean expectation for a Brian Robinson season, but it doesn't feel like there's anything being factored in about the risk of Brian Robinson getting replaced in a month and a half. I'm not sure he's ever going to be a real difference maker on your team anyway, and I just don't want to carry that type of risk this time of year.
Heath, how many running backs have legitimately 3 players that will take carries from them in some capacity?
Brian Robinson.
Actually, no. Probably James Cook, too, as much as I love him.
I hate that whole situation. I love James Cook, but yes.
But we also know that he's going to be as efficient as it gets.
And he's really good. So that's the big difference there.
And
right?
at least Josh finally ran last season. But we always have to have a Bills tangent in some capacity when I'm here. Brian Robinson is right now. We already saw them clearly want to give Jaden Daniels inside the 5 rushing attempts. Eckler will play on third downs. Deebo will get not only maybe 3 carries per game, but if Brian Robinson is running a route, guess who's running a route? Probably in the same area of the field. So right. I think his ceiling and floor are kind of low in this offense, which is weird because it was just this elite offense. They should still be really good. And Brian Robinson's still going to be fine. But I like this call a lot because what is the best case scenario for him in terms of production? I don't know. It's like
a low end RB2, I think.
Right. Like if he finishes as running back 23 or 22, you're probably like, all right, fine. That's probably around what I expected.
Little wins, big losses. And I just think like this is a rare situation. I'll tell you, going through this exercise, comparing my rankings to consensus, you do come to realize that none of us are geniuses. We're all kind of thinking the same thing about 90% of the players. But this is a rare situation where DeAndre Swift is ranked about 10 spots lower than where I would rank him. Brian Robinson's about 10 spots higher than where I would rank him. And I would absolutely make that trade straight up.
Yeah.
And it looks like just about everybody else would do it the other way.
Who averages more touches per game? Say the Bears don't get Jeanty. Give them any other player you want in this class, but it's not Jeanty. Who averages more touches per game, Robinson or Swift?
Oh, that's a great. You're setting each one at -110. I think.
Right.
I think that's a great.
And Swift is what, RB35 and Robinson's 27. I think you said.
Right, and they're basically the same age.
And Swift's probably going to catch more passes. And yeah, that's a really good shout by you with the comparison between the two. And again, that's at the end of the day, we talked about it. We led with it. It's all about value. That
was a lot of agreement. I think we may get to the point where we get some disagreement here because everybody loves Justin Herbert. He is an exceptionally talented quarterback. I'm not going to say anything bad about Justin Herbert. And people get frustrated sometimes when I cite what a guy did last year or what a guy's done the last 3 years. And I always try to remind them that like the most predictive thing about how many fantasy points someone's going to score next year is how many fantasy points they scored last year. What you have to do if you want to make an argument they're going to be better or worse than that is explain the why. And I think it's worth noting that in 2022, Justin Herbert scored 19.3 fantasy points per game in CBS scoring, and he was QB 17. In 2023, Justin Herbert scored 20.9 fantasy points per game, and he was QB 10. Last year, Justin got the new coaching staff. Justin Herbert scores 19.1 fantasy points per game, and he's QB 16. So that's 3 seasons in a row of QB 10 to QB 17 production, 20 to 21 fantasy points per game. And he's currently QB 7 over at Keep Trade Cut in terms of the consensus value. I don't think he's at the point any longer. Like, he's still young, but he's not at the point where at the quarterback position, especially in the landscape of dynasty quarterback rankings at 27 years old, he's not getting a discount for that anymore. There are more guys ahead of him in my rankings. I have him at 12 that are younger than him than older than him. What's the argument for Herbert as a top 7 dynasty quarterback, or you just agree this is also a sell?
I feel a lot better about it if DK Metcalf was playing on this team and he actually got to play in warm weather. That's for sure. The one thing I will say about Herbert that could be the difference, you look at, obviously it was this run-centric offense with the Chargers, which we fully expected. I was at least a little bit curious with Greg Roman coming in if they'd actually utilize Herbert's legs a little bit more, and they did. He went up to about a 15% designed rush rate. The year past, it was around 11 to 12%, so it went up a little bit. We saw that a little bit. I still, at the end of the day, think you're hoping he gets to like 500 pass attempts, which he barely got last year, I believe. He was, again, a high-end quarterback too, but I think we have to kind of, despite the arm talent, the amazing talent he is, and we've seen him in the past when the Chargers were On the opposite end of the spectrum, the most pass-heavy team in the league, we've seen him be a top 5 quarterback in fantasy. I don't think that's the team this is going to be. I don't think that's the volume we're going to see from him. So I think we just have to continue to treat him as a high-end quarterback too, despite the age, the talent, the production, the immense upside. Just like, again, it's not even just the fact that they haven't added anybody yet. They also lost Josh Palmer, so it's Quentin Johnson, it's Ladd McConkey, and then it's really nothing else. I think Herbert should be, again, viewed as a high-end quarterback too, but again, if I would feel a lot different if they had a true, real difference-making wide receiver opposite Ladd.
I don't know why you hate Quentin Johnson. No,
Quentin Johnson made plays. If you go back and watch, it was literally 85%. Just I don't know how he scored off blown coverage every single week, but he did. So shout out to him.
So, and again, like we got a comment in the chat about how not worried about Herbert, especially if he gets a tight end this year. And I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not worried about him.
Right
at all.
But he's currently being valued as QB7, and I just don't. I mean, he'll probably have a couple of seasons where he finishes that range, but I'm not taking Justin Herbert over Caleb Williams. I'm not sure there's going to be a huge difference in production between Justin Herbert and Bo Nix, who's younger. He's a better quarterback.
Drake May's rushes were great as a rookie, and they've already talked about with McDaniels that they're going to continue to utilize that. I don't think, again, I don't want to be too, contradictory, but because the Patriots just don't have anything a wide receiver really,
right.
But I wouldn't be surprised if Herbert and Drake May stat lines in 2025 weren't too dissimilar.
This is a good question from the chat. Herbert or Kyler? Herbert's definitely the safe answer.
Kyler I struggle with because he has 30 points or he has 12. There is zero in between. And a lot of those 12-point games last year were because he and Marvin Harrison just could not get on the same page on these back shoulder throws in the end zone. I want to believe that connection is going to be a lot better in year 2. So I will lean Kyler, but it is like that is I feel like if you looked at 90% of dynasty rankings, they are back-to-back for everybody.
Well, I have Kyler 10, I have Herbert 12. And I probably wouldn't they're close enough to where I wouldn't be like making a 1-for-1 trade probably. Right. But the kind of the point of this exercise is the consensus value here shows Herbert as QB7 and Kyler as QB13.
Yeah, I mean,
if I'm getting Kyler plus for Herbert, I'm slammed. I love that deal.
Yeah, it's not even a debate. And I do believe, I didn't have him on this list, but like Marvin Harrison, I have so many stats about him, about like how they utilized him. He actually was top 5 in tight coverage rate, and it was because they literally lined him up on the perimeter and just said, hey, go win. So I'm expecting a lot more of the scheme stuff for him. Not that he's like, Brian Thomas or some of these other rookies after the catch, but he's not somebody that can't do stuff after the catch, Arizona. Let's get him the ball, please.
I had 2 wide receivers on my sell list. They are Brandon Aiyuk, who is currently valued as wide receiver 32. And I hate to say it, you guys know how much I love Mike Evans, but Mike Evans at wide receiver 36.
Why don't you love 1,000-yard seasons, Heath?
I love 1,000-yard seasons. I love 10 touchdown seasons. Mike Evans, I believe, was my most drafted wide receiver last year in redraft. He's 32 now, or will be by the start of the season. Father Time is undefeated. Chris Godwin is back in Tampa. When those two played together last year, I was looking dumb for Mike Evans being my most drafted wide receiver in redraft. And so I think I am not confident at all that Mike Evans is going to be better than Devontae Adams. In fact, currently my projections, I've got Adams projected higher than Mike Evans.
I have Adams ahead of Evans too.
And they're both 32 years old. And Mike Evans is currently wide receiver 36 and Adams is wide receiver 44. If I'm buying a vet wide receiver, I'd rather buy Adams straight up, and he's cheaper.
I do not disagree. This is not very fun, but I literally did my rankings yesterday, had Adams ahead. And again, Mike Evans we know is going to be good, but he dealt with those hamstrings a couple times last year, and it got a little scary. Obviously was on IR for a little bit. And what happens if Jalen McMillan gets a little bit more of a role? Not that he is going to be anything more than the wide receiver 3 on this team, but he's proven he's very capable. And yeah, I mean, Godwin was literally a top 5 fantasy wide receiver before the ankle. So it felt like it was definitely still like 1A, 1B, but Godwin was the 1A. Will it be the same with coming off the ankle? Maybe, maybe not, but it's just between that value of Evans. And again, like you said, 32 years old. It's not like he hasn't had like major injuries, but he's going to miss a couple games a year for sure.
Right. Yeah. So, and then Aiyuk, like he had the injury last year. I don't know at what point.
There's not a player I don't want to trade for, or I want to trade for less right now than Aiyuk. I don't know if he's going to be on the team. I don't know if he's going to be healthy. Somebody tried to trade him to me like the other day, and I was like, I have no interest.
So somebody's trying to trade for him. Let's say somebody thinks they're buying low on Brandon Aiyuk at a wide receiver 32 value. What type of rookie pick would you take to move him? He currently is one spot behind Luther Burden in terms of value. That's probably 106 to 108-ish in Superflex. I would take any first round pick, I think.
Yes.
Like what somebody sends you 110, you're smash accept.
Yeah, because it's not even just the ACL and everything. I just don't know where he's going to play.
Right.
Like I don't know how there's still trade rumors when he got the contract last year and he's got the ACL. Give me any first and I'm probably hitting accept.
You had Devontae Smith as a sell as well, right?
Yeah, and I hate it because this time last season, he was literally one of my favorite players to draft and redraft, and it's all because of Vic Fangio. He transformed this defense, and Devontae Smith became literally a 6-target-per-game guy. And the season started where it was like, I was so excited about Kellen Moore putting Smith in the slot, and we saw that. I remember the Week 1 game against Green Bay. He was in the slot like 60% of the time, was something we had not seen from him. And the floor was way higher, it looked like. Then the Eagles defense became the best defense in the league, and from week 6 on, Devontae Smith averaged 6 targets per game. From week 6 on, the Eagles had a 54% neutral script rush rate, the highest rate in the NFL. I don't think you have to trade him because he's still an awesome player and this is an awesome offense, but they just extended Saquon Barkley for 2 more years. I don't think the offensive identity is changing anytime soon after winning the Super Bowl. And yes, they lost a couple pieces on defense, but I feel like outside of maybe Milton Williams, they kept a lot of the core guys. I just kind of view him as like a 6 to 7 target per game guy, which he can still be good, but he's behind A.J. Brown. Barkley's getting 20-plus touches every single week. I think if you can move him for, like, who's he ranked ahead of or around? Like, I'm trying to think of players that were close with him.
Yeah, Devontae Smith is currently wide receiver 18, right behind Tet McMillan, Rome Odunze, T. Higgins, A.J. Brown.
T. Higgins, I don't think is even close. I would rather have T. Higgins in a landslide.
He's right ahead of Rashee Rice, Jordan Addison, DJ Moore, Xavier Worthy.
I would rather have DJ Moore. I would rather have Rome Odunze. I'd rather have T. Higgins. Would you rather have Rashee Rice? I probably would.
Yeah. I think just based on there's so much more upside.
And I love Devontae Smith. And like, if you had me rank 10 players I wanted to draft at the most last year, Smith would be on that list. Right. But the offense changed because the defense changed. And it didn't just go from a bad defense to mediocre. It went from bad to literally the best defense on the planet. And that crushed him. There's so many games where like Jalen Hurts threw the ball like 10 times in the second half.
Right. No, and we'll see. Like those things don't stay that way forever.
Sure.
So maybe the Eagles defense has a fall off.
This is the one I feel least confident about, by the way, because he's such a good player. Jalen Hurts is awesome. The offense is awesome. But T. Higgins is like the polar opposite where he's just as talented and he's going to get an offense that throws the ball 40 times per game.
My final Dynasty sell won't surprise anyone who's listened to the show over the last couple of weeks, but I am so out on Evan Engram. He is currently tight end 14. Tight end 4 would be really awful. Tight end 14 over on Keep Trade Cut. Yes, he's going to the Denver Broncos. Yes, 10 years ago, Sean Payton had a really good role for a tight end in his offense.
I drafted Kobe Fleener once.
He's coming off of one of the least efficient seasons ever. You look at players in NFL who have had at least 50 targets and an ADOT below 6 and Yak below 3.5, which he was 5.4 for his ADOT, 3.2 for his Yak per reception. it's basically just really terrible. Football players and Evan Engram twice now in his career. He is going into his age 31 season. And this doesn't, some people, this doesn't matter to at all. I always keep track of it just because I think like, yeah, they're going to increase their tight end target rate because they went and signed Evan Engram. I agree with that. But over the last 3 seasons, 14.2% of the targets in Sean Payton's offense have gone to the tight end. That's terribly low. It's really difficult to have a system where you have a high running back target share and a high tight end target share. Those things generally, one of them is better than the other. And we know Sean Payton's offense has always had a high running back target share, and I expect that to continue again next year. I'm not sure that Evan Engram is going to be a top 12 tight end, and he's old. I'd much rather have Travis Kelce, and he's ranked 7 spots higher.
It really comes down to, do you think he's getting top 5 target volume again? Because that's what he lived off last season. Mm-hmm. He was bottom 10 among tight ends in EPA per target, yards per target, yards per reception, like you mentioned, just unbelievably inefficient. I don't think he's going to be 5th among tight ends in targets per game this year. So, yeah, I think the move makes sense for the Broncos, obviously.
Right.
I also don't think if he's on the board, they say, you know what, we don't have to draft Tyler Warren because we just signed Evan Engram. Like, I think that's still in play for them to draft one of these guys, Colston, Loveland, whoever.
Joff in the chat says Brenton Strange over Engram, and I do agree with that one. And he's currently 6 spots behind.
He's in the same role he was, and he's probably more explosive of a player. And by probably, I mean definitely.
It would be hard to be less explosive than the guy who has averaged less than 9 yards per catch in 3 of his last 4 seasons and has only scored more than 4 touchdowns once in his NFL career.
He just does not see end zone targets ever.
Evan Engram gets a lot of targets. He is one of the worst in the NFL at turning targets into fantasy points. In point per target leagues, maybe you do like Evan Engram, but go sell him along with Justin Herbert, Tyrone Tracy, Brian Robinson, Brandon Aiyuk, Mike Evans, and Devontae Smith. Don't sell Adam. We're going to buy. Thank you for coming on here again today. Remind everybody once more where they can find your work.
Always a blast. Yeah. FTNfantasy.com. Check it out. Again, just excited for the draft and to see these landing spots. I'll be doing a bunch of content over there, as well as baseball. I mean, I don't do baseball, but baseball is here. I know we talked about this before. You and I both used to do baseball and football. Right. Glad that's over, and I'm glad we have an awesome team at FCN that can cover you for baseball because I just – it's been like 5 years now since I've done it. I can't do it anymore.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Thomas, for running everything. Thank you, everybody who was active in the chat. I will be on vacation next week, so we will talk to you in April.